Hi there, this is Doug Stannard. I'm the president and CEO of the Leaders Institute, and I'm also the founder of the Fearless Presentations class, the two-day public speaking class that it basically took the world by storm over a decade ago and has really helped a lot of people, tens of thousands of people, reduce their fear of public speaking pretty dramatically. Um, just so you know, in this little program, we're going to cover an overview of the Fearless Presentations class. We're also going to show you where public speaking fear comes from and really how to reduce it, give you a few tips on how to reduce that public speaking fear. We'll also give you some ways that you can collect additional information about the two-day public speaking class or collect free information off of our Facebook page and some other places as well. So if you look at the two URLs that are there on your screen, facebook.com/fearlesspresentations and the fearlesspresentations.com, those are two URLs that will give you a ton of fantastic information about how to speak more effectively in front of a group, how to reduce your fear, nervousness when you stand up there, that anxiety that we feel when all the pressure's on us. The Fearless Presentations page itself will give you lots of information about upcoming classes. Our blog is on there that gives all kinds of free articles and actually has access to free videos as well about how to reduce public speaking fear. If you like our Facebook page, facebook.com/fearlesspresentations, then anytime we update that with new articles or new videos, then you'll get a copy of that on your Facebook page. So that's a great way to kind of keep in touch. As we get started here, let me kind of cover just a couple of quick things about why training in presentation skills especially can really help people get ahead. The picture that you see on the screen there is actually a picture of an iceberg. It's actually a reminder of an analogy that was created really over about 100 years ago. A guy named William James, who was kind of the father of modern psychology in the United States anyway, basically said that in a person's entire lifetime, he or she is only likely to tap into about 10% of their potential. He said it's like looking at an iceberg. That huge mass of ice that you see on the water is really only about 10% of what's there. 90% of the iceberg is hidden below the surface. And he said it's the same with us. 90% of our potential is hidden within us. Now, if you think about public speaking fear and the way that people react when they're asked to speak in front of a group, you can see why that's the case. Most people very rarely develop the skill of public speaking because of the self-consciousness that we feel, that nervousness that we feel. If you've ever gotten up in front of the group and you got kind of the jitters or the shaky hands or the sweaty palms or the butterflies in your stomach, or if you lost your train of thought, or if you had to rely on your PowerPoint slides way too much and kind of sounded kind of monotone or even, somewhat boring. Any of those things, those are all symptoms of the same challenge. It's public speaking fear. If you reduce that public speaking fear and you become better at speaking in front of a group, you tend to tap into a whole lot more of that untapped potential. Just like the iceberg there, you're able to really tap into more of that potential and get ahead. So how do we do that? Basically, how do we tap into that untapped potential? Well, there's actually a four-step process that we go through anytime we learn anything, really, whether it's public speaking, which is what we're talking about here, or if you remember back when you were 4 or 5 years old, or if you've got a little kid in the house, when we were learning how to ride a bicycle for the first time, or when you're 15, 16 years old and you learn how to drive a car for the first time, or if you even think back to that first time that you got a computer, or if you just got one of those new smartphones or iPads or any of those kind of things, the very first time that you pick those things up and you try to develop that skill, there's a lot of nervousness there. I remember the first time I got my smartphone and went to the application market on my Android phone. I was nervous as all get out because I was afraid that I was going to hit some button and I was going to get charged 150 gazillion dollars for the next 16 months, that kind of thing. Well, a lot of people have that kind of nervousness anytime you do something new. If you think back the example I was giving you before about learning to ride a bicycle, if you're 4 or 5 years old and you get on the bicycle for the first time, there's always that fear. Hey, I'm going to fall over. I'm going to hurt myself. And what happens is over time, we begin to develop skills by going through this four-step process that we're going to cover here. If you look at the top of the screen, it says the first quadrant there on the right-hand side is what we call the Attitude Quadrant. That's where we start. We're going to ask ourselves a series of questions. Number one, is this thing that I'm going to be studying, public speaking skills or whatever it is it something that I absolutely need? Because if I don't think I need it, I'm not really going to put out a whole lot of effort into it. And then just because I need it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do anything either. I also have to have want as well. So I have to have a need and a want big enough to cause me to move past the status quo. And when that happens, once that kind of, and by the way, when the want kicks in, it's usually something from the outside that has kind of caused us to make the change. Like for instance, in public speaking training, there's a good chance that the reason why you're watching this video right now is because something has happened in the recent past. Either you got up in front of a group and you didn't do as well as what you wanted to, or you got a really big presentation coming up and there's a lot on the line. Something from the outside typically moves us from the need to the want. And then once that happens, usually doubt will creep in. Hey, I don't know I need this. I know I want it, but heck, I'm not sure if I can. And when that happens, that's when the fear or the nervousness will start to create itself. Now, the interesting thing is once we move through that attitude phase and we say, yes, this is something I need, this is something I want, I'm going to give it a shot, I'm going to try to do this, we start looking for information or knowledge, which is the next quadrant. We start moving into that phase and trying to collect as much information about this new skill as we can. Now, the interesting thing about this part is that most people think that the more knowledge that you have, the more skill you're going to develop. In fact, we've been taught from the time that we were, 4, 5, 6 years old that knowledge is power, right? The people that have the most knowledge are the winners. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's not knowledge. Knowledge by itself is pretty worthless. It's our application of that knowledge that actually makes us, that's actually valuable to us, that makes us more successful. And so it's not until we take that knowledge and we put it into practice and we actually have a success that we actually start to develop that skill. So basically, it's a four-step process. We have to start with the right attitude and help ourselves kind of overcome that initial nervousness. And then if we collect some information and move into the practice phase, and in that practice phase we have what we appear to be a success, we think we've had a success, then we kind of move into that skill quadrant and we think, okay, that wasn't as hard as what I thought. I actually did pretty well there. What tends to happen though is if during that practice phase we have what we perceive to be a failure, even though we might have done pretty well, if we just think we didn't do well, we move back into that attitude phase and the doubt actually gets bigger. That's where public speaking fear comes from. It doesn't mean that we've ever had a failure in front of a group, but if in our head we think we didn't do as well as what we could have, then that doubt increases, the self-consciousness increases, and it becomes more difficult to overcome that fear later on. So if you think about it, going back to the bicycle example that I gave before, if the first time that a kid got on a bike, he or she only went about 2 feet, fell over and broke their leg, it'd probably be very difficult to get back on the bike a second time. So what tends to happen is that what we want to do when we're teaching a kid how to ride a bike is, have somebody there holding the back of the seat. That's what a coach does. A coach in that practice phase is absolutely vital, and that's what most people forget. They think, if I just get up and practice, I'm going to do pretty well. But what happens is if you don't have a coach and you have what you perceive to be a failure, then that fear can really jump up. That's why we encourage people to really, get a professional, get a coach that has trained people in the past, that knows what a success looks like. And typically, if you have a good coach and you move through this phase 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, in a very short period of time, that self-confidence will kind of blow through the roof. Very, very effective way to kind of learn how to develop especially learn public speaking skills anyway. And that's what we do in the 2-day public speaking class, in the Fearless Presentations class. We put people through a series of step-by-step processes that help them have success after success after success after success in front of a group. And after you have 5, 6, 7 successes, doing some pretty complicated things by the time we get to the end of the second day, then it's very easy to go out on your own and develop those skills without the coach. That's the real beauty of the Fearless Presentations class and how it really works. And we're going to cover a few things that you can do on your own to develop some of that confidence when you go up to speak the next time. So in the Fearless Presentations class, we covered 10 things right up front. In about the first 20, 30 minutes or so of the class, we covered 10 ways that you can reduce fear basically like that, very, very quickly. The first one is we have to realize that most of the stuff that happens to us when we get nervous never shows to the audience anyway. 90% of that nervousness doesn't show. If you think about it, when we get nervous, our heart starts to pound, feels like it's going to beat out of our chest. The audience is never going to know that our heart's beating faster. Even if we get the sweaty palms, the audience isn't going to know that we're going to have sweaty palms. Even if if our hands are shaky, unless somebody is sitting like right on the front row and really looking at your hands, as long as you're kind of moving your hands a little bit, they won't even see that. So most of those things that happen to us that we think that cause us to have such a failure in front of a group, are things that the audience isn't going to pick up on anyway. Now, the reason why this is so vitally important to understand is that most of the time when we're speaking, we're not necessarily the only person speaking that day or in that meeting, and we watch everybody else get up and they do such a fantastic job, and we look at ourselves and we feel all those nervous things happening to our bodies when we get up to speak. We sit down and we think, God, I'm the only person that screws this stuff up. I'm the worst speaker out there, and we start really beating ourselves up about how poor we are at speaking in front of a group. When in reality, we're probably doing just as well as everybody else, and sometimes even a little better, maybe a little worse, but not nearly as dramatically different as what we think. That's a real relief to a lot of people, and that's one of the reasons why in the Fearless Presentations class, as we get through some of the first few presentations and we start to use some of the videotape feedback to really show people how well they're presenting, they're shocked at how great they actually look on tape when we actually play it back to them. The next one, the tip number 9 of the 10 is you never want to write a talk word for word. That's one of the biggest mistakes, and is actually one of the things that causes more fear than anything else that a person can do, is try to write out a presentation word for word. In the old days, we used to write them out on 3x5 cards or legal pads or something like that. Nowadays we have the high-tech solution, PowerPoint. So I'm not ever going to forget anything that I'm going to say, because I'll just write everything on my PowerPoint slide, right? So what we end up with is 142 slides with 116 different bullet points on each slide. It becomes very monotone and boring to deliver. But one of the things that we show people to do very, very early on in the program is to design their presentations first. Get to where they can deliver the presentation, and then use your PowerPoint slides as a visual aid. That gives people a lot of freedom, because they're no longer tied to their notes. If something happens to their PowerPoint slideshow, so what? It doesn't make that much difference, because they've got their presentation down, and that gives people a tremendous amount of confidence. And it's something that most people don't really know how to do. So when you're able to do those kind of things, you're putting yourself into a very, very elite group of speakers. But in the Fearless Presentations class, we actually covered 10 of these things. I'm kind of got them blacked out a little bit because we're not going to have time in this short presentation. But in the first 30 minutes of the class, we show you 10 phenomenal ways to reduce your nervousness, and then we spend the rest of the 2 days really helping people put that into practice. So if you want to hear the rest of those 10 things, if you want to have us show you those 10 ways to really absolutely eliminate presentation fear, and in addition to that, if you're looking for a very simple process, a 3-step process to learn how to help people, or help yourself persuade your audience anyway, or learn how to design compelling PowerPoint presentations in just minutes. In fact, we show people how to design an entire slideshow from start to finish, visual aids, and being able to deliver their presentation very, very quickly in about 15 minutes or less. Very, very fast, easy way. And the cool thing is that you can use that for any type of presentation, because it's very, very, very flexible. We also show 15 ways to add energy and impact to any presentation. And one of the big things is being able to really give presentations without any notes whatsoever, so you're not tied to your PowerPoint slideshow, that kind of thing. Anyway, if you're interested in those kind of things, then make sure and register for our 2-day Fearless Presentations class. And even if you're not ready to register right now, if you just want to get some information about the program, make sure and fill out the form below this video, and somebody from our office will either shoot you an email or give you a call and give you some additional information about programs that are coming up, or any question that you ask, really. So fill out the form below. We'll get some information to you ASAP.